All right, so welcome everyone. We have with us today our guest designer, Ron Clark, and the subject of tonight's class is going to be interviewing. Um, I know Ron through the Evanston Art Center, through the screen printing class that I teach there. And as I got to know Ron, I learned more about what Ron does in design work and teaching at Northwestern. And so it seemed to me like a really good idea for Ron to talk to all of you about interviewing. How about Ron, if you could tell the students a little bit about yourself, you know, background, summarize what you do, and then we can talk more about, interviewing, what you do, like you interview people for design work.
Yeah,
So I'll let you take it away.
happy to. Thanks, Duffy. Hello, everyone. My name is Ron Clark. Unless you are definitely allergic to it, I would love it if some folks would come on video just so that I could see some faces and get some feedback. I do have a very light presentation to share. Let's see. It says the host isn't allowing multiple presenters sharing for this meeting.
Okay, I'm going to do that.
Oh, cool.
Um, a minute, second here. I'm going to make you. I'm going to make you the host.
Awesome. All right, I'm the host now. I like it.
Yeah,
Uh, there we
and then
go.
hopefully you can share that.
Yes. All right. Can folks see my presentation?
Yes.
Awesome. Uh, so a little bit about me. Like I said before, my name is Ron Clark. My most recent role, I'm a partner and vice president of strategic design at a company called BCGX, which is a part of the Boston Consulting Group. My role is sort of a fancy way of saying that I help companies develop and produce new products and services. So I formerly studied design at the Institute of Design in Chicago. I got a BS in product design, grew up in Chicago in the South Shore area. Started my career in Chicago working for sort of smaller innovation consultancies, and then eventually decided to take a break and get a creative recharge. And so then I went and got my MFA in film and video at CalArts in California. And then after CalArts, actually went back into product design. So I did about 5 years in the Sony design group working on consumer products. After Sony, I joined the BMW design group. So I did not work on cars, but I worked on everything kind of from healthcare to consumer products. And then after BMW, I came to BCG. I primarily work in sort of a sector that's called industrial goods. So it's helping sort of very large, expensive companies sort of think about new ways to innovate and particularly how they can use digital to do transformation. Again, I had the good fortune of meeting Duffy through screen printing, and the rest is history. Um, One of the reasons I'm happy to speak to all of you today is that in my background and in my roles, I have had the pleasure and both the honor of interviewing and hiring, dozens of people, sort of creative types for my role, primarily from product design backgrounds and primarily from interaction design backgrounds. But I think the broad scope of like, what does it mean for creatives such as yourself and designers such as yourself and how they think about particularly interviewing or applying for work. I think there's definitely lessons from my world that apply to your world, and hopefully some of that will resonate for you all. I probably had the pleasure of interviewing probably I tallied it up across my career. I've probably interviewed about 200 people, so everything from interns to director level folks. I've seen a ton of patterns, and so over the course of this conversation, please feel free to stop me. This is meant to be interactive, so please, if you have questions, please ask away. But that's a little bit about me. So I'm based in Evanston. Our office is in Chicago. And again, I've worked in small boutique firms to larger product design studios to now more traditional sort of innovation consulting, but that's a little bit about me. I wasn't sure what the setup was going to be, so I had a little bit of an interactive exercise. I'm not sure how many folks have access to paper and pencil, but like how many folks have paper and pen handy? Yay.
Hey,
And I do.
I do.
Oh, that sounds awesome. All
That
right,
sounds awesome. All right, so
let's do this with the folks that can do it. So we're going to take 2 minutes, a little bit of an icebreaker, and the prompt is to design a coffee cup for an astronaut in zero gravity. Again, this is just to, get us loose, get the creative juices going, help me understand a little bit more about you. Again, there's no right or wrong, but let's just literally take 2 minutes. Imagine you were designing a coffee cup for an astronaut on the International Space Station. What would it look like?
Okay. I'm getting something here. Do you want us to talk about it or draw it?
Draw it out, and then
Okay.
you'll talk about it.
Okay, I'm gonna do this.
Whatever the first thing that comes to mind.
Yeah. Good place to start.
I'm gonna give it a little bit more than 1 more minute.
Okay. This is good. Work fast, think fast,
Yes.
come up with something. So is the idea here to just get a beginning and then move from there?
Yeah, the idea is just to put out one random creative thought. My secret intent is that I want to hear from all of you and get to hear a little bit about just to hear your voices and learn a little bit about how you think.
Yeah.
And just to kind of get us engaged in a cross conversation and not me just
Good.
rambling
I will help by asking the students direct questions.
Awesome. All right, we got 1 more minute.
All right. Making some improvements.
I'm not sure who the person is on the iPhone, but your still image was, I was like, wow, she is perfectly frozen. I was like,
Yeah.
he's not moving at all. I'm like, oh, that's a photograph. All right.
Yeah.
You got me.
Just really good at sitting still.
No. All right, 30 more seconds.
All right.
Great. All right, I'll go first. Hopefully I'm gonna put this so you guys can see it, hopefully.
Yep.
Oh,
yeah, there you go.
What's it doing? Yay.
Oh, if you hold it up closer to yourself, there you go. Yeah.
All right.
I like it.
So mine is just a sphere. It's intended to be soft. Those spots that you see on it are Velcro. So the idea is that the astronaut would kind of gently hold this soft rubber ball, drink coffee out of it, put the lid back, and then if it needs to stick somewhere, they just kind of stick it on a wall. And it has no hard edges, and it can kind of bounce and not hurt anybody. So that's my completely disposable idea. But I would love to hear from somebody else. Danielle, talk to me.
Hi.
Hey.
Okay, so mine, I don't know if you can see it.
Yes.
Yep.
Oh,
okay. So my idea was kind of like a sippy cup, and where the astronauts could grab like the handles on the side. And then I had a straw coming out, but behind it, I put like a hook, and I imagined having like a hook on the International Space Station that the hook would close.
Yeah.
And so they could like hook it onto that loop and it wouldn't be able to like fly up.
Love it. And I also love the fact that your design looks like it kind of looks like sections of a launcher, like it's got modules. It's really cool.
Nice.
It was like
it really carries over that space theme.
Thank you. Thank you.
Awesome. Hey Mary, what did you scribble down?
Okay. Can you see?
Awesome. Yes.
It's
Yeah.
yeah, just sort of like a coffee cup with a kind of like a built-in straw thing so that the coffee doesn't go floating all over the place.
Love it. And I love the fact that you gave enough proportion to the straw that you've got enough kind of like flexibility to kind of move around it. So that's what I'm seeing when I see that
Mm.
kind of exaggerated proportion. Awesome. Anybody else?
I have one.
Go for it. Dan.
Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay, so it's a it's a tall cylinder. It's got straw for drinking from it, and then a hole for allowing air to pass through, so there's no just get stuck in there. There's a grip, and the bottom has a magnet
Okay.
that will allow you to stick it down to like a metallic surface.
Love it. Love it.
So that way it won't just float around. It'll sit upright or and if it presumably if it like if you're like rolling in space,
Yeah.
the suction we still got to work out the design of how you keep it from flowing out of the straw if you go upside down.
Right. Okay. That's all good. It's all good.
Yeah.
And I love, to me, when I see in your sketch too, is that there's potentially like that grip could be maybe switchable because it's very robust, but it looks like it has a seam. So maybe you could swap it out. But that was just the
Yeah.
vibe I'm getting from it.
Definitely.
Anyway, thank you all for indulging me. The point was just to kind of get us all talking and get the energy. I'll go back to share mode now and kind of show you some stuff. Okay, so if there's one theme I want to convey to all of you today is this keyword around trust. I think for many of you, whether you're interviewing or Danielle, it sounds like you've already landed an internship with awesome. I think the key theme that I've found throughout my own personal experience is that you, as a talent, as a creative, as a designer, you are trying to establish trust with that person that's going to say yay or nay about your role. It might sound a little obvious, but it's interesting because when you think about trust, and you think about strategies to build trust, it's really about what kinds of things or what kind of things can you lay out that sort of act as a groundwork so that you can build connection with that other person, and that can be a foundation for trust. I think to get a little bit more specific, when you think about the interviewer, trust is really trying to help them ratify four things in their mind. Like, do you understand the job? Do you understand the role? Can you actually do this job? Will you do the job? And then does your performance pose a risk to my career if I hire you, right? And so when you think about trust as a theme, the point is to work towards helping to sort of answer these things mentally for your interviewer so that they get a sense of like, all right, I can check these four off. I know this person probably has tremendous potential. And I think, again, these four questions are things that constantly I think about and that I've thought about in my experience. But I really just wanted to say, like, man, if there was one keyword that you could take from my spiel today, it would be like, think about strategies and ways that you can build trust and keep trust for folks that bear that kind of responsibility for your career or getting the role. There's a amazing TED Talk. I'm going to give Duffy a copy of this. This gentleman, he does a lecture. His name is Simon Sinek, but he does a lecture on trust. And I'm not going to play the whole thing, but maybe just like literally the first minute of it. And it probably won't play because I stored it as a PDF, but I'll send him the link. Take a look at it. It's really good. It's, he brings up an analogy. For example, he says, for example, say you have children and there's a 16-year-old on your block that you know from the neighborhood, and there's a babysitter with 10 years of experience that you've never met before, a professional babysitter. You're still more likely to give your kids over to that 16-year-old that you know versus the babysitter with 10 years of professional experience because of trust, right? And that the way that you think about trust is shared beliefs, shared values, and that becomes a foundation for connection and kind of really building the right types of connection that can drive success at work. So It's about 14 minutes. I'll send the link. It's really, he's got great examples, but it really brings home this notion of that in your mind, and particularly where you are in your career and in your role, trust is so paramount. And that's what you're
Mm.
really trying to work towards.
Good.
This is like a really simple framework that I sort of created to help think about your journey as you go from like the beginning to the close. And so as you think about starting your search, and again, forgive me, I know you all are smart, talented designers, so I know some of this will be redundant, but I tried to codify and say, okay, what are the things I'm always repeating to people or repeating to talent or folks that I talk to? So thinking about the beginning, it's a no-brainer around researching the company that you want to work for, using a resource like LinkedIn to really research the firm, employees, and what is their IP? Like, what kind of ideas are they putting out there? Are they publishing articles? Are they linking to content through LinkedIn? Understanding, like, it's pretty easy to do, some sneaky research and understand the folks that might be actually deciding whether to hire you or not at the particular company that you're looking for, and sort of doing that kind of early research to really get a sense of like, does their work align with what you want to do or how you want your practice to develop as a designer? Typically, I've found that if you approach folks in the right way and at the right level, oftentimes you're able to get an informational interview. So I've had people approach me on LinkedIn and say, hey, I'd love to learn more about BCGX. This is my background. Can you spare 15 minutes? And informationals, if that person that you're talking to has the bandwidth, it's like it's low stakes, right? It's like you've got a compelling background. Typically, certain leaders want to get the word out about their company so that they can build, build an audience for their company. So they're willing to share and have that conversation. I think, the no-brainers around like having a great resume that's specific and written around the results and things that you've delivered is pretty straightforward. There's a lot of tools and advisory services that can help you with that. And then I'm sure most of you already have your own website, which should reflect your philosophy, your values, your best work, but particularly your POV. I think, the one thing I would say about this first column is beyond doing your homework around the company that you want to work for and really understanding them, is really trying to understand, like, does that company align with the work that you want to do? Because I think if you can find that connection and if that alignment really exists, then that type of enthusiasm from that connection will come out in your conversations with the folks that have to decide if you're a good fit. And so, you know, there's so many resources now with the internet and LinkedIn and through other conferences and networks that you can find out what you need to know and see how that company is representing themselves in the world. And and it's a perfect time to figure out, like, okay, why is this company, here are the top 5 things for me why this company is right for me, either how I want to grow and develop my practice, or here's the work that they do that I want to do one day, that kind of thing. And so I think taking a moment to really have that alignment explicit, either in your notes or in a write-up, that kind of thing, I think is super critical. But let me pause with section 1 and see if there's any questions. Please.
Or I have something to share, add to this, that just in terms of the interviewing and like thinking about the company you want to work for, something that came up, if you looked at on my YouTube channel, like the session we did last summer with Cindy Stark, where she talked about wanting to leave a job and then interviewing for jobs, but she didn't know anything other than she wanted to leave her job. And so she had some bad interviews.
Yeah.
To the point where one of them, she was being interviewed and they said, you don't really want this job, do you? Like, no. And she realized that she was just trying to get out of something, but she didn't know where she wanted to go.
Yeah.
And so then she had to regroup and just figure out, like, what do I want? And like work on ways to do a better job. Just, interviewing, even just doing a better job looking for a job.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I think, I've got some simple book recommendations towards the end of this that I think also brings home that point, Duffy, in terms of like giving yourself a framework to align, like, here are my values and here's what's going to make me, successful and happy, and making sure that you can see that in the destination of where you want to end up next.
Yeah, great.
For phase two, the actual interview itself, I think it's super important to remember. And again, sometimes it's Captain Obvious, but sometimes we forget that this is supposed to be a two-way conversation. So when I'm interviewing talent, I'm expecting them to give me questions and inquire about either the type of work that we do or what's going to make them happy or how they want to grow. And if I find that they're not asking questions about the firm, then that tells me that, again, to your point, Duffy, that they maybe aren't either clear about what they want or they're not sure what to look for. And so this is kind of split up into two parts. So I think one of the things I always ask talent and designers right away is like, tell me about your design journey, right? And so, typically you might get the question of, tell me about yourself. And if you get that question, I would recommend that you break it into two parts and say, well, there's a personal part and there's also a professional part. What would you like? And when you flip that question back to the interviewer, the good thing about that is that it immediately makes it interactive. So if they can say, oh, well, tell me about your personal hobbies or your personal interest, or tell me about your professional journey, you've engaged them and it immediately kind of starts to become a little bit more dynamic. So I think you need to be prepared to tell me about, like, okay, what's your design journey? Like, people come into design for a host of different reasons, and I find them to be typically super the most fascinating part about someone's story, because a lot of folks don't know about design as a profession, whether it's interior design or product design or interaction design. So most people kind of fall into it. You see that trending less nowadays, but even I would say 4 or 5 years ago, people were like, oh, I found out that you could do this for a living and I never knew, right? So listening to people's lives sort of before they knew about design and once they knew about design, I find to be really fascinating. And I think typically how you describe your journey is either through sort of a series of projects that reflect sort of your proudest work, or it can sort of reflect how you've grown and sort of like skills that you've built along your journey. So, for example, in my own career, I came out as a product design major, but I was not a form giver. Like, I can draw, but I was not the guy that was going to design, like, here's what a perfect TV looks like or a phone. I was more sort of what you might call a design strategist. So I was like trying to figure out how to use design strategy to help companies figure out what was next. So the first part of my design journey was around working for a firm that created design strategies for other companies like Steelcase, different airlines. And they typically ask the question of, like, what's our future? How do we imagine our future? After I started sort of working in a strategy role, then I went to work at a firm where I learned to understand that users were the keys to driving really interesting innovations. And so if you wanted to design, say, for example, a better minivan, then why not talk to people who actually buy minivans to understand their needs and their problems? Because having a user-centered perspective would then drive the most relevant and connected design solutions. So I went from strategy to understanding user research. And then I actually then went to a more kind of formal bread and butter consumer electronics firm that had to produce designs every year. So then I learned about more product design and manufacturing. And then eventually I went to blank, right? So I could sort of talk about, like, here are the big nodes on my journey. And then, hey, company A, this is why I think this is the best place for me now because of where I am on my journey. And this, from my previous experience, I bring all of this to bring value to your company. So being able to sort of say, like, what's your path, I think is super important. Understanding, you should be asking questions around, what does success look like in the role? Like, when someone asks me, like, hey, for this role that I'm interviewing for, who's done it and who, like, is a rock star at this role, and I can articulate that because, believe me, I've seen them, then I know that they're looking for just to drive success and to come in and immediately have impact. That's the question for me that's always a light bulb, like, okay, this person is trending towards the yes category, like, let's learn more. Typical day in the life, that's an obvious question. Obviously, understanding what that person or the candidate knows about the company, and then again, understanding how they align with the work of the firm. So oftentimes, like, if you're working at a cool studio, sometimes I've had candidates literally just say, oh, I want to work here because this is just such a cool place. And I'm like, okay, let's do a double click on cool, but really understand, how does the work that the firm that we do align with what you want to do or how you want to grow and develop your practice. And so really understanding the nuances of deliverables, of process, of what the firm creates or what they could create in the future, I think is so important. But let me stop at the interview part one. So the interview part one is more like the mindset that you should be thinking that you need to extract and get out of the conversation with your interviewer, because this should be two-way. But let me see if there's any questions around that part. All right, I'll jump to the next part. So the next part is what I'm calling the 6 C's. And the 6 C's are, for me, what I look for and what I think are and great candidates. And so I put this at the top of the list because it is non-scientific, but I can guarantee you I have seen multiple cases of it. The most successful people that I've ever hired, the number one thing that they have is energy and enthusiasm. It doesn't mean that they come into the interview and they're bouncing off their chair. And it doesn't mean that they are like, talking nonstop. But there's something about folks that bring literally like this energy about the role, about the possibility, questions about the firm, the energy about their background and their experience. Those typically are the folks that once they're hired, they just do amazing. And so that's why I put energy, enthusiasm. I needed to see, so I'm calling it charge at the top of the list. The second one is curiosity, right? And so, and curiosity works both ways. I think, when someone is asking me about, hey, what are the challenges in the role? How does this role that I'm interviewing for fit into the larger picture in the company? What is the growth potential? Like, does this role affect decisions at the highest level of the company? That kind of curiosity, again, is a light bulb to me that this person needs to be pushed into the yes category, because they just want to know more. And then again, I say this because you would be surprised how many folks I'm interviewing and I have to like pull things out of them, or I have to do 90% of the talking. And if there's ever a pause, like they don't fill it. Again, another super obvious one is like at the end of a conversation, and then I'm like, are there any more questions? And the moment someone's like, no, I'm like, okay, like that's not good. Like there's got to be more that we could talk. I've just met you. We've only talked for 30 minutes. This is a pretty important role. You have got to have more questions. And so again, that's what I'm calling curiosity. Competency, that's a really interesting one. This is another interesting success factor. I think it applies a little bit more to folks who are maybe like haven't reached a certain level, like director and above, but let's just say depending on the role that you're coming in. I found that talent, if they have really hard skills, they immediately have a foundation for success. So again, I'm going to pick on you again, Danielle, but I think I heard you say SketchUp and something else that you were working in. Like those types of real tactical skills, I found that when you come into an organization, particularly at an internship level, that immediately sets you up for success. So for example, I hired a gentleman who also, ironically enough, he was a former architecture major, but again, we don't do interiors or anything like that. But he was an architecture major. Some of the folks were like, oh, I'm not so sure. But he was a whiz at Creative Suite. So like Photoshop, Illustrator, like all four, like whatever, the four core of Creative Suite, he was a whiz. Like he literally knew hotkeys. He never had to touch a mouse because he knew shortcut keys for everything.
Wow.
We hired him. Like literally day 2, I said, hey, I've got this diagram. I've got to show this work plan to a client. I literally gave him a hand-drawn sketch. I said, can you make this? I need to make this a poster. He came back. It was formatted in Illustrator. It was a beautiful diagram, beautiful hierarchy, great layout, colors. I literally sent it to the plotter. I printed it like 3 feet by 5 feet, and it was like client ready. I literally gave him no feedback. And it's a perfect example of like, when you come in with a hard skill, you immediately can do something that either someone else at the firm cannot do or someone else at the firm does not have time to do. So what I did not have time to do was to sit down in Illustrator and perfectly format this diagram. Now, granted, if he didn't have those skills, I would eventually have to do it. But his hard competency and in those tools, I was like, his name was Casey. I took Casey, I literally put him in a chokehold, and he did not leave my side for an entire summer. So I'm sure that there's things in your program and there's programs that you're working on daily. Find that one or two and master those programs, because
Yep.
believe me, in some environment, there's people that are going to look and say, oh, you can do that and do it fast. They're going to eat you up, and it's going to make you extremely valuable. Go ahead, Doug.
Yeah. That's this one thing that I think that guy Casey also showed is an ability to extrapolate from incomplete information.
Yes.
He
Fill in the
figured
blanks.
out, filled it in, and also used his imagination. He knew what you wanted it for, but he had some idea of what it should look like. So that's
Absolutely.
helpful.
And I think that bleeds into the next C, which is around creativity. I mean, don't take it for granted. I mean, you all are designers, you all are different levels of your profession and your practices, but stay creative. Like, you would be surprised how many folks that I talk to. Again, I'm typically looking at more folks that either come from design strategy or interaction design, and I might say, hey, here's this existing thing. How would you make it better? And there'll be crickets. And as designers, for all of us and as creatives, there's never an excuse not to be creative. And I'm constantly probing for some level of creativity / imagination. And sometimes, like, you can make creativity as intuitive or as formal as you want. There are books and there are processes, and I'm sure many of you have seen, where you can sort of, for lack of a better term, scientifically make something creative. So so one simple strategy is that you go to extremes. So if you have a thing, you could say, I'm going to make the smallest of the thing, like an iPod Nano or a Walkman, or I'm going to make the largest of a thing, the largest music player ever that holds like 6 TB of music. So there's simple strategies that you can apply to a context to come to be creative. And so I would never, um, my expectation whenever I'm working with a fellow designer or another creative is that we have to be the most creative people in the room. We have to be the people that are thinking in new ways, thinking of maybe solutions that sound a little silly at first, but then can get more grounded and get more realistic. So never underestimate your need to kind of like be creative on a moment's notice.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
But it reminds me of it's like a test or exercise that like it's a cognitive thing to just do this with children, teenagers, adults. You might ask on it's to test a certain, I forget the term for it, but you ask like preschoolers or kindergartners, how many uses can you think of for a paperclip?
Yeah.
They'll come up with hundreds.
Yes.
The older kids get, the more they learn about practical applications, the fewer they come up with. And when you
Yes.
get to like adults will come up with like 10 or 15. Kindergartners will come up with it because they'll say like, can it be made of ice cream? Sure.
Yes.
Can it be, a mile long? Sure, but we got the material. This is all imaginary. So that ability to just dream something up, something that happens is that often in education that gets just like it gets suppressed because it's not considered to be practical information.
Absolutely.
But it gets you started.
Yes.
And it just like, and then the crazy idea can be developed into there's like a unique idea.
Absolutely. And when you become the catalyst for that as a designer and you do it with confidence, then you are also giving license to other people in your group to think in new ways as well. And also you're giving them license to like fail and license to experiment, right? And so, you know, you don't necessarily want to be the person that's got on like, the pointed cap with a spinner and you're like, hey, I'm the wacky disruptor. But that ability to have that impracticality as Duffy described, do it with a certain level of confidence, be able to build on the ideas of others, working in a team and saying, oh, I hear that idea. What if it also did this? Yes, and right, then you are then creating an environment that suddenly you're going to be the person that's driving the most creative meetings, or you're the person that's going to be driving the meetings that when everyone leaves the meeting, they were like, oh my gosh, that was like a breath of fresh air, right? And so you want to be that creativity catalyst. And that takes a certain level of courage because sometimes you're going to say things that people might think are ridiculous. But over time, depending on the environment that you work in, you are going to be a magnet and an attractor for other like-minded folks who want to stretch and do things in new ways. And I can only imagine in interior design, I mean, in environments that you know, you have even more of a license in terms of like where directions can go and what could be the foundation for new ideas. So don't underestimate your need to keep that muscle flexing and not get into a rut where you're like kind of doing the same thing or you're like, hey, I'm just doing my job. You want to be that creative catalyst. And that transitions to the next one, which is around collaboration. It's a no-brainer, but look, teams do the best work and teams do big work, right? You need a team to get to Mars. You need a team to get to the moon. You need a team to build the iPhone. You need a team to build an amazing space. So your ability to collaborate, and you know, and that means building on the ideas of others, being an energy giver, not being an energy suck, coming in with a consistent attitude, like, you know, something that was told to me that I really took it to heart was like the best managers, and all of you in your practices will eventually be managers. That's just how it is because you're managing your own ideas and your own programs. But the best managers are boring. And what that means is that they are always consistent. Like they're not like these emotional highs where they're coming in and screaming one day and they're coming in the next day and they're in the mopes and they're moping and they're down. A great leader, they're boring, they're consistent, right? And they keep that energy and they keep that energy at a certain level. And that also that consistency or that being boring, if you will, is also what drives collaboration, right? So you don't walk into a meeting with this person and thinking like, are they upset today? Are they in a bad mood? Or man, they were really happy yesterday, but not so today. You've got that consistency. And that consistency, that willingness to build on the ideas of others, that ability to take feedback and to build, that is again gonna make you a great collaborator. And you're gonna be the first person that's picked for the softball design team because you're gonna bring that energy that people need to get stuff done. So you can't underestimate collaboration. I know as creatives, we all have different practices. I know when we're all at home, we were like, you know, I just need to be alone in the attic with my candle so I can be creative. But in the workplace, and particularly in a studio, right, you have to come in and you have to fit in from day one. And if it's a Monday, you've got to be just as productive if it's a Thursday. And that consistency and people are understanding like, wow, this person's even keeled. They can take feedback. It doesn't throw them off the track. They can take criticism and feedback on the designs. They don't have to then go and get themselves together, or they can take this thing and build it and keep going. That resiliency and consistency will make you a great collaborator and then a desired asset to whatever team you're on. And I think the last one is what I'm calling conviction. As creatives, as designers, as artists, I'm sure all of you have very varied backgrounds, but I cannot stress enough. Please have a POV on the world. Like we are all super interested in the man-made world, right? Like we react to a shade of paint color, we react to a font that's chosen for a menu, we react to a new style of electric car. And so what I mean by POV is that, you know, when you're talking to another creative, I'm always looking for like, what do you think about the world? And it doesn't have to be, I'm not talking about politics or, you know, Capitol riots. I'm just talking about like, you know, it could be like trends in aesthetics. It could be the, you know, the Pantone color of the year. It could be about brand new materials that you saw a YouTube video on that you find super inspiring, or it could be an architect or a designer that um you know, is your hero that you want to emulate, or, you know, or it could be the types of spaces you want to create that get you motivated. It's just having some type of POV about the man-made world, because as designers, creative and artists, that's what we care about. And so you'd be surprised oftentimes when I speak to interview younger talent, there's this certain kind of like numbness or like where I'm kind of like trying to pull teeth to say like, hey, it could be something as innocuous as like, hey, Tesla just came out with a new 3 Series design. What do you think? Or what do you think about a Tesla interior versus a BMW interior around electric cars? Or, hey, what do you think about this new building that they're putting up in Singapore, right? So I'm stretching, but my point is like, please have a POV and,
Yeah.
look at stuff. I'm sure you all have your favorite blogs and news sources and Instagram channels, but absorb that stuff and share it out. And again, please, Duffy. Yeah.
Yeah. So on this, one of the things for interior design, there have to be designers that you know about that you like
Great.
you like their work.
Yeah.
And who are they? That can be a conversation where because part of what what Ron is talking about is like you find common ground with people.
Exactly.
You're working with them, and also with clients. You're finding common ground because
Right.
they have a problem to solve. The solution doesn't exist yet. You're the one who's going to be at least part of the solution to it. And so it's communication, but also like even just like talking about just figuring out where other people stand, even like with something just like even like a prompt question like the interior of you know the interior of a car.
Yeah.
If you're doing automotive design, people have feelings about it. And it's kind of nice when you've just even like with interior design, um even like Pantone color of the year is a good example. It was a few years ago, it was the like yellow and gray,
Mhm.
which I liked. At
It's
first I didn't like
awful
it.
this year. It's awful.
What is it?
Isn't
What
it
is
like the Kardashian taupe?
It's like a brown. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
horrid.
It's Kardashian taupe.
Yeah, I think she did
Yeah, I love that. I love that term Kardashian taupe.
well, she did a special edition for Beats headphones, which was like kind of like a chocolate frosting, and now that color is now the Pantone color.
Oh, come on.
Yeah.
See
Yeah.
there's my view.
But see, look, all right, look, we're already rapping, right? So that's
This
the
is
whole
good. It's a
point.
point of view.
I'm an open book, but Duffy will tell you that. I will talk.
And to Duffy's point, that common ground then becomes the foundation for trust, right?
Yeah,
Which was the key word
absolutely.
in the beginning. And even if
Yeah.
you and I disagree, us debating the merits, that's what
Yeah.
inspires us as designers and artists and creatives,
Yeah.
right? And so I think that I love that, and I love that when that comes out organically. But please have an opinion about the man-made world.
Yeah, absolutely. That's
yeah.
so it's a question I will sometimes ask, especially like when I teach the interior design 100 first semester class. A lot of, students don't know of any designers yet. And so then it's time. So you definitely have opinions. You have ideas about what you think looks good, what you prefer in terms of style. Find out who's doing it, find out more about them. You have classes like history and for style and design. But you also get into like a lot of new products. And I think I'll appreciate that some stuff like these, upholstery or stone samples, like you can tell like something that just, it feels good, it looks good, and you can imagine it being applied.
Mhm.
And that's where you can get like really geek out with somebody else. They're like, isn't this gorgeous? And it can be this common ground where you are really just enjoying something together.
Absolutely. 110%.
Yeah.
So let me close it off. I think, again, hopefully your interview has gone great. You're waiting to hear what's next. I think, again, going back to Captain Obvious, the thank you note or the email is important. I always, as an interviewer, take note when someone takes the time to do it. I think the extra grace is when someone takes the time to sort of add a couple of lines about why the conversation was helpful.
Mhm.
And you know, even if the conversation, even if the candidacy doesn't work out, hearing that, hey, it was a pleasure describing or discussing more about topic X, it's just a great way to round out that process and make the experience great for both me as an interviewer and you as an interviewee, right? So that kind of extra note is important. One obvious thing you can do is provide links to content relevant to the interviewer, right? So it's like, hey, I came across this article, and you could just shoot them a link to the LinkedIn. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to like kind of invade their space, but just say, hey, here's something related to what we talked about. You said you're really interested in X, here's a link to that. Just again, a little kind of forget me not, very simple, very innocuous. And then, depending on how well it went, sometimes you can have a great interview, but still the candidacy doesn't work out. So, and what I mean by that is like, oh, you are number two, or, if we had more headcount, we could have, hired you. So, you didn't bomb it, but it still didn't work out. And then again, you've got this opportunity maybe in a semi-annual way just to send an update. Like, here's a link to a new project or a new interior I've just developed. Or, I've been really inspired by this new material here. I just wanted to share a link. So again, finding that way to kind of check in a way that's not obnoxious, but just keeping that thread, that networking thread, I think is super important. I'll give you a perfect example. I interviewed a candidate once, a very smart young man, and it didn't quite work out. And then a year later, he contacted me and said, hey, I'm at this company, Strava. There's a role I think you would be perfect for it. So, here's a guy that I had to turn down their candidacy, but he actually sent me, information on the job at his company because we had had such a great conversation. So it's a two-way thing, a simple reach out. If you got a sense of like, hey, that was still a good conversation, even if I did or didn't get the job, just to have that network, you never know. Again, a year from now, things could change. That person you interviewed has gone somewhere else. They remembered you. They're like, oh, I remember this about you. Maybe you weren't right for that role at that time, but you'd be perfect here. It's never personal. It's never personal with these types of things. And you never know what that person you were talking to resonated. It could be, again, it could be that one connection you had, that one thing where you saw eye to eye on, and that person made a mental note and it might carry with them in their career. So if you sense that there was something positive there, just feed that bond so that you don't lose it. And that's kind of a super high level framework. I think here, this is what I was just more keywords with intangibles. Again, like we said, energy, that you're open to feedback. Say if you present your portfolio and if there's some challenges, are you willing to listen and say, oh, okay, this is where you would push back on some of my ideas? Do you have the ability to extend ideas? So it's like, oh, I see you did it here. How would you take this idea further? And you can go further, even if it's real time in the moment where you improv it. We talked about creativity. We talked about skills balance. And again, that warmth and confidence. Again, a little bit of Captain Obvious here, but you'd be surprised how many folks that I've encountered that don't bring these things to a conversation around a role that I assume that they really care about. So this should all be authentic and sincere, but those are the intangibles that you look for, that when you have your kind of final evaluation with a candidate, it's some of the things that might tip the scale for you versus another, particularly say maybe if you're in a tight competition. This one is a little bit of a outlier slide, but I'll try to explain what it means. When you come into a firm, particularly if it's an intern or you're just starting at a firm, what I'm trying to show here is I kind of crib this from a class I teach on design leadership, but there's two types of power when you jump into an organization. And there's like position power, right? So someone is either the VP or they are the director or they're the president. And there's personal power. And when you come in as an intern or you're starting your career at a lower or at a starting level within a firm, what you have is on the right-hand side, you have personal power. And so what that means is that you have to really develop two things. You have to be seen as your capacity to influence and to have success is really around being likable and knowledgeable. And that's what it means being referent or expert. And so the point I'm trying to make here for you all is just think about, really, it's just that simple. You have to be likable. like, man, that person, every time they come to a meeting, they're always positive. They always add ideas. They're super creative, you know, that kind of thing. They always think of a new solution that we haven't thought of, right? And then knowledgeable. Oh, wow, you know, so and so is an expert at these materials, or so and so is an expert at this program, right? Or they really know their stuff when it comes to like calculating volumes, blah, blah, blah. Like, I don't know all the dimensions of success for interior design, but you get it. But my point is, it's just like, just to be cognizant of the things that are going to be looked at right away. And this is, again, something I cribbed from a study on leadership, but it's just a reminder that when you come into an environment, like, what can your superpowers really be when you first start? And it's really about being likable and being knowledgeable. So that's what this means. And the jargon is there, but that's really the takeaway. I typically recommend 4 books to talent that I work with and people that I hire, and none of these books are expensive. They're all like, you know, one is like none of these books are more like than $12, and you can find them used for even cheaper, but I'll tell you why they matter. The first one is called You Need a Manifesto. It's a very quick read. It's put out by the Stanford Design School. You could probably read this book in like an hour. And it really just gives you a series of templates so that you can say, like, as a designer, this is what I care about. This is what matters to me. This is the type of environment that would make me happy. And it's kind of like literally like a self-help guide for you to articulate what kind of designer do you want to be and what kind of values matter to you. And again, remember, the reason that we're trying to do this is so that once you can articulate your values, you then have the things that you can send out to find that common ground and to build trust. The second book, I know you guys love this generic cover. It looks like it should have like a 1-800 number connected to it, but it is a book and it just has all the typical questions that you get and you always hear about, like, tell me about a time you failed. What's your worst quality? You know, and so she has really quick, great answers to literally 100 questions. I've used it before. It's a great book. The one thing that's the thesis of her book, which is really important, and I think what makes it valuable, is that every answer you give should always be around what you're doing and how it's relevant to this job, the job that you're applying for. So even if the question is around, what was your worst mistake at work? You know, she talks about how you use the STAR method, which is like, hey, this is the situation, this is the action I took, this is the result from that action. And because of that result, this result makes me great for this job. And so what's great about her framework is that she goes through all the questions you're going to get, but she tells you about always making about the job in the moment that you're applying for, which I think is wonderful. So that's why, despite the generic homemade press looking cover, it's a great book to have. The Simply Said book, the reason that book is wonderful is that it teaches you, like, I noticed that a lot of folks, when they start, depending on their experience, they're not necessarily client ready. So it's like, for example, if you come into a firm, would they put you in front of a client? Would they let you write communications? Would they let you speak to the client? And what's great about Simply Said is it teaches you simple things like, here's how to write a concise email, or like, here's how to tell a colleague how to get something done in 4 steps. And so it tells you how to de-jargonize, how to state something clearly. Again, it's a pretty quick read. It's the kind of book you can probably read in a couple of hours, but it's just really great about workplace communication and you coming off a lot more competent and client ready. And then the last book, Think Better, that goes back to some of the creativity stuff that we were talking about in the example that Duffy was given, which is like, it's just some simple frameworks to make sure that you're always thinking of a way to make an idea more creative. And again, like, go to extremes, think about the smallest version of something, the largest something, you know, change materials, change perspective, you know, what would happen if this type of person was trying to solve this versus you. So Think Better is just a really great book around creative frameworks that helps you take a coal of an idea and turn it into a diamond. And again, they're all pretty quick reads. They're not expensive books, but this is usually the set that I recommend the folks that I meet, depending on what level they're at. And yeah, ignore this one. I kept this one as an appendix because I didn't know. Oftentimes in the interviews that I have, we give folks something that's called a practical. So we give them 48 hours to actually do an assignment. So we don't take them just on a resume alone. So we say, here's an example of the type of work you would do if you were hired at this firm. And you've got 48 hours. Here's the problem. Go solve it. And so this was just a framework to say, like, this is how typically you evolve a case-based interview. I'm not sure that you all deal with that in your practice. So you can kind of ignore this one. This was just sort of an appendix. If folks are like, yeah, they gave me homework, but this is how I typically grade a case-based assignment. And that's all I got.
Thank you.
Like it. Yeah. So there is a lot there. Any questions for Ron?
I do have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So you're talking about like giving homework or like an assignment for the candidate to do. I interviewed with this company for interior design, but like for social media content creation, right? And I was supposed to be their creative person. Like I was going to be content creating for them. And they did give me an assignment. It was like, they wanted me to create content around these 3 products that they were selling. And I wasn't used to it at the time. I was like, wait, this is new to me because I work with social media right now. Like I do content creation and I charge per post. So per product or like whatever I'm doing.
Yep.
And so to me, that was like a little weird. I was like, wait, like, is this normal? Like, is this a normal interview process? You know what I mean? So I was like,
Yep.
kind of confused and thrown off by that. They ended up paying me for that specific assignment, let's say.
Great.
But like, my question is that normal? Like, for example, like if I'm interviewing for an interior design company, can they like ask me to do something and then I have to? Is that part of the process? That's what I'm asking. Like they can ask me to do something, you know what I mean? Like design this room, I don't know, like something like that.
So look, I think I can't speak for interior design. I can speak for product development. And I think to answer your question, I think there's always a range of good and evil. And I think there's always a range of, sincere versus insincere. I think it's awesome that you get paid for that. In our case, for example, we typically will ask a prompt around something that we've done in the past. And so there's no way we could leverage it going forward.
Got it.
And to be perfectly honest, many times, given the fact that we're given an example of a 3-month project and asking someone to create a framework in 48 hours, there's no way they're really giving us enough work that it would be like, oh my gosh, this is a complete solution. It's really just again to show how they think, how they would structure the problem, what kind of frameworks do they have, and what kind of creativity and presentation skills do they have. And so I think it would probably vary from firm to firm, but in a lot of cases, particularly in creative fields, the resume is not enough, right? So you can say that you've done X, Y, and Z, or you can say that you've mastered X, but you really need to be able to kind of show and prove.
Is this Erica?
Yeah, it's me. Sorry, like I can't turn
Oh,
my
hi,
camera on. I'm
Erica.
trying the whole time. Hi.
I just wanted to chime in and say that I have heard with our profession that firms will ask you to draw a plan out, whether it be SketchUp or AutoCAD or, Revit if you're going to go commercial, or Chief, which we haven't learned at Harper, but, there are classes elsewhere. To have you, to make sure that you understand what it is you're going to be doing there. Right.
Got
Like
it.
draw this out. They want to make sure. They don't want to take your word for it. And just because you have something up on a website, that doesn't mean that
Right.
you could do it right there on the spot when, that you're like job ready, let's put it that way. Right,
Yes.
that you're like ready to actually insert yourself into that position. That's what they want to know. But I have
Okay.
heard it done. So
Danielle,
I
think
wouldn't
you-
be surprised if somebody asked, you to do that.
Danielle, I think
Okay,
you're
thank you.
exactly right. Yeah, I think it's, to your point, it's really about assessing what is that person's readiness. Is that person ready to be in front of a client? Does this person need additional training? Or maybe this person has really strong strengths in a particular dimension of their candidacy, right? So it's really a great indicator.
Got it. Okay, thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Yeah, I think it's fair for the employer to want to see how would you do with this?
Yes.
And like just all the candidates, how would you apply what you know or what's on your resume and your portfolio? There was a similar thing. It was a student that had an internship when I was at Harrington. There was a student. There's a bachelor's program for a lot of the students, and a lot of them went into commercial design. One of the students got an internship. It was either Geddes or Gensler, but the first day, this was a really good student who was, really among the best in her class. They, showed her around and said, "Here's your workspace." It's a big commercial firm. They do a lot like, hotels and tall buildings. And they said, "Okay, here is something we're working on." And they asked her to do like space planning for 60,000 square feet in a high rise. And say like, here's some, basic, here's some information. This is like, it's, this is the client, like this is the need of the client, like this is the type of space. And said, if you have questions, like, talk to, Phyllis over here. But, then the supervisor left, and they just like left her with 60,000 square feet on her first day. And at first she says like, okay, I guess I'll get to work. And at the end of the day, they wanted to see how she was going to do it, like how she would react, like how would you respond? And she worked mostly independently. She had to ask a few questions, but she just said, okay, I guess I'll just get to work. And she was nervous and worried. But at the end of it, the supervisor came by he said, yes, this was a test. I wanted to see how you would do and how you would react to just having a lot of work given to you. And you did well. And he said, I didn't think you were going to get it all done today. Because she got a lot done, but it was like, but it was like people will do that. They'll give you a test to see how do you do. And they were happy with the work she did, but it was stressful for her because she didn't really know. She wasn't in on this was like a, let's give you what might seem like too much work and see how you react to it, because that'll happen professionally where it's like, I have no idea how we're going to get this done by tomorrow, but we have to.
Yeah.
And that's common. Any other questions, anyone? No. Was this interesting? Useful?
I thought it was interesting and useful. I like your
Yeah.
6 Cs.
Yeah.
I think I took some screenshots. I hope that's okay.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hopefully,
And
yeah.
saved them to my computer so that way I would have them in the future without having to go back and rewatch the
Yeah.
video.
Yeah. It's good. I'll post this on my YouTube channel, and I'll give you guys a link to it if you want to like go back and review any of it. And really, and it is like, interviewing. There's a lot of good information here about like, if you not just, if you already have an internship, fine, you're going to have another interview at some point for a job. And, it's, the interviewer, like the company needs you and you need them. So it's not just you go, like, it's not an interrogation. I can seem like, nervous, like, they're gonna, like expose your weaknesses, But, you know, there's like the question that like, it's like the question that I think is it's, to me, it's a bit of a trap. We say like, tell us about your greatest weakness. And, you know, you should really turn that around. Like Ron brought up the idea, like talk about like, like your biggest flop at your previous job. You turn it into something that's useful. Like if someone asks you what's your greatest weakness, you could answer it in a way where you don't refer to it as a weakness, but there's something that I've always wanted to know more about, that is related to this job in particular. Like, you'll know you're not everything. No one can know everything, but if you have like software skill, but interior design, especially like tech skills, there's AutoCAD is a good base. And then you have other things like SketchUp and Revit, Chief Architect, which is kitchen and bath design. And people that go into kitchen and bath design, you'll have to learn Chief Architect because all the kitchen and bath designers use it. And then there are going to be more, and there are other things that you kind of learn them as the job requires of you. But you can't know everything, and so the greatest weakness question could be, here are all the things that I really am looking forward to learning about, because I want to know more about these things. And it expresses enthusiasm, curiosity, and it hopefully is something that is related to that employer and the work that they do, and that you would presumably be doing with them. So, but you can't know everything. And I would resist the temptation to say that I'm really bad at something.
Yeah.
It just doesn't sound good.
Ever. Yeah.
If you are really bad at, like I really suck at drawing, like, well, don't.
Was that a reference to me?
No, I'm not. You can't tell if I'm looking at you. I'm looking at.
To me.
Is Duffy that mean a teacher? Come on.
Yeah. According to the camera, I'm looking at everybody. But that's was the way I when I was in college taking figure drawing, and like someone would say like, oh, I'm really bad at drawing like hands and feet, and so that would immediately, the professor would say, well, guess what you're going to be drawing. So you get better at it. If you feel there's something that you need to be better at, then find a way to be better at it before you go to something like an interview and discover like, ooh, like I need this skill and I don't have it and I could have it. And if I've known for a while that I need to get better at something and I haven't done it. And so, don't miss your chance.
Yeah, it's way more interesting to hear how you overcame it and got good at it.
Yeah. But I think as an employer, they're not great at everything.
Totally. Yeah.
And you don't expect them to be, godlike.
Nah, that's impossible.
Nice when they are, but. All right. Ron, thank you for taking the time to talk to the students.
My pleasure. Great meeting all of you.
Appreciate it.
And,
Thank you. Nice meeting you.
continued success in the program.
Thank you
All
so
right.
much.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Thanks, Ron.
Take
Good
care.
night.
Right.